Okay, what I want to do in this video is just to pick up on the last couple of videos I've been making about Michael Polanyi's understanding of knowledge that he expresses in several of his books, specifically the Tacit Dimension, but it also informs a lot of his other writings in Knowing and Being and, well, in a whole series of essays that he did. In the last video I was talking about his understanding of the explicit. And in the previous one to that, I talked a little bit about the whole idea of the tacit and explicit and the distinctions that Polanyi was starting to make in that. And what I want to do here is just to finish off by saying a little bit more about the tacit, the idea of tacit knowledge as Polanyi understands it. And then I want to just close by reinforcing what I see as the key metaphors that run through that distinction he's making between tacit and explicit, and how it operates within, well, the key metaphors that he's drawing on are spatial metaphors, as I've said before, and there's a mapping on subjective, objective. It's not the same, they're not complementary terms, they're not the same terms, but the same overall schematic epistemological metaphor is being drawn upon, which is an epistemology based on metaphors of space, and kind of corresponding complementary metaphors to do with sensory modality, the different sensory modalities that operate within space at different spatial distances, for example. Okay, I'll be reading this, and this is about, I start off talking about tacit, and then as I say, I widen that out. The other term in Polanyi's apparent binary is, as I've already noted, tacit, and it's familiar from its derivative, taciturn. I say apparent actually because these are neither complementary nor opposite. Taciturn, I beg your pardon, tacit and explicit are neither complementary nor opposite. As Polanyi himself indicates, they are terms which describe the structure of a dimension, not separated and isolated alternatives. That's something I'm going to come back to in a future video. Both words, taciturn and tacit, have in common their origins in silence and in that which is passed over in silence. The difference that makes a difference is that whilst taciturn suggests a reluctance or an unwillingness to speak, tacit does not offer even the possibility. Paralleling the physical principle of subsidiary awareness that I talked about in a previous video, to be tacit is to be constitutive of expressibility, but to take no part in that expression. What I was saying in that previous video and that other posting was that the example that Polanyi himself gives is the difference between what he calls subsidiary and focal awareness. And he gives the example of the eyes, that depth perception is a product not of one eye or of the other eye, but of the processing that takes place within the brain using the inputs from the two separate inputs from the two separate eyes. So in Polanyi's terms, the input from one eye is fully available to consciousness, but it's subsidiary to the focal awareness, which is the depth perception that's produced by that collation, that construction out of those subsidiary forms. And he says the same things about tacit knowledge, that tacit knowledge is constitutive of of other more expressible knowledge forms, but takes no part itself. Though tacit knowledge has position within the body of the speaker, that position is disposition. In contrast to explicit knowledge, which folds out in the direction of a metaphorically external distant object, tacit knowledge stays close to home and to the condition of the subject. In the spectrum of knowing and being, tacit knowledge blends into being. Okay, so the overall image that Polanyi provides is one in which an understanding of knowledge and knowing maps onto our experience of being the being at the centre of phenomenal space, and makes consistent use of metaphors of space, as well as the different sensory modalities which function at different spatial removes. That which is tacit and which is close to us, or even which is interior to us, does not extend into space and cannot be visualized and objectified. If it is sensed at all, this sense is felt rather than observed, a sensorial engagement appropriate to its proximal intimacy. That knowledge which is tacit is held in the necessary silence of our being. As knowledge becomes explicit, it coalesces into another being beyond the limits of our skin and the limits of our arms. Performing its primal act, knowledge rolls out toward the horizon, leading our eyes to the object created by that unfolding. Okay, that's the end of the writing I've done on this. I guess all I'm saying there, just to reinforce that if it's not clear, is that the tacit explicit dimension which Polanyi is talking about is kind of makes sense to us because it's drawing on very familiar metaphorical structures, and the metaphorical structure is one of primarily one of proximity. So tacit knowledge is conceptualized as being close to the body or internal to the body, and almost part of one's own sense of being. It's very close to feelings, and it's very close to kind of intuitions, those kind of ideas. Explicit knowledge, on the other hand, is conceived of as being distant, removed from the body, detached, and perhaps not available to touch and feeling in the same way, but primarily available to the visual sense. So we might talk about explicit knowledge as being something that you can see, in inverted commas. Okay, I hope that makes some kind of sense. Thanks very much for watching.